Kisii had staged a military coup of a civilian government of Mohamed Morsi, who died in detention later, and Washington and London were complicit in not speaking about the same. Then how do the Kenyan people safeguard their hard-won gains constitutionally, is what I mean here, from what you have labeled as the monopoly of the personalities around our politics? Because it's William Ruto, the deputy president, who said the Kenyatta Odinga detente was a mongrel outfit. Today he's serving that mongrel outfit in a different name called broad-based. Then how will the Kenyan people safeguard that and then instill the question of leadership in their cause, as the people in Egypt did in demanding for good governance?
Maybe you should have told William Ruto that hujafa hujaumbika. I think that one thing is that we are at a happy place politically. And I say happy place because something is happening in the globe today. There is a situation obtaining in the global stage that was not obtaining in 2009, 2010, 2011. That today, if you look at most countries in the global stage, particularly in the West, there is this wave of populism that has brought to power many far-right political parties and far-right governments. One thing about far-right governments is that they are inward-looking. Inward-looking governments are usually not keen to intervene much. And that therefore means that we might have very little interference. I'm using the word may very categorically in this instance because, as I said earlier, Kenya is a strategic geopolitical station, and therefore I don't think that all the players might close their eyes. Two, I'm a student of history, and history has taught me very intimately that there is no one political figure or institution that is invincible. So the moment as young people we can sustain intelligent political organizing and mobilizing, then I think we can run out the old rotten political order that has failed to deliver the promises of the Kenyan dream to the people. About young people, about our activities being hijacked, like the one that like the Egyptian one. I think that remember that the moment Hosni Mubarak fell, Muslim Brotherhood was the most politically organized force in Egypt, and that is why naturally Muslim Brotherhood was able to ascend to power. Part of what we have learned in the last 1 year as young people is that for all the chance and the pressure we generated, we were not very politically organized. That is why now, as we sustain this pressure, we are also actively and aggressively politically reorganizing, so that we make sure that we sustain this pressure, we make sure that this country changes, we make sure that when eventually we declare that we are having a presidential candidate.
And complaints and activism of the people. I do not think probably this is the right time to propagate, any notion that the people can, but a healthy and a sustained national discourse on issues of national importance is very, very important and is highly encouraged at this particular point in time. Sustained political pressure, such as the one we are seeing the opposition is doing now, as long as it's not partisan, as long as it's not laced with invectives.
When you say opposition, which opposition?
The current political opposition in Kenya is very, very strong and has aimed its weapons against the government. Of course, at times they drift into petty issues, personality and personal issues. But it's a very healthy national conversation, healthy national pressure, as long as we make it objective. Because at the end of the day, what we want to see happening is that we want to see change. So that if there's something wrong with Chief and Shah, the ministers, the cabinet, the responsible pressure for the greater good of our people. The greater good is that the government is now listening. The government is trying to address.
It has not told us who killed Denzel Omondi. We do not know who killed Rex Masai. We have made the conclusion that because it is the government that has got the responsibility to protect the lives, so then government, we the young people, hold the government accountable. But then, over and above that, the government has also not moved with speed to ensure that the country heals from this pain that was inflicted through the massive deployment of rabid force against the citizens in terms of compensation of the victims. So we've not had the government tell us that it is willing to compensate the parents of Denzel Omondi and the many young people who were killed. Out of all the repeated commitments by the president that abductions will stop, we continue to see abductions. As we speak, there is a young girl, a member of Interparty's Youth Forum, called Wanjiku Thiga, who was ostensibly arrested for whatever charges we do not know. And then when she was released, she was again rearrested. And today she is in court. The way the government is...
Facing terrorism charges.
Yes. Yes, she is facing terrorism charges. So I do not know if a government charging young people with terrorism charges is what you... And if there is evidence, why is she not presented in court? And you're a constitutional lawyer, Bona Professor. So that she is released, and if she's required in court, she...
Ever felt like you've run out of road? With the right fuel, you can go further.
Our practice of diplomacy as backward. So I look at the landscape, the political landscape.
Constitutional architects that allows us to exercise our rights in far different ways and enjoy these fundamental freedoms. It is a healthy thing to do and to put the government to challenge. And I was saying that when you see the police cultures shifting in certain directions, though not much, it means that there's a government that's listening. That was my point. It means that there's a government that is listening, and it means that the Kenyan political pressure, the Kenyan political activism is actually, this is whatever we are seeing in Kenya.
Yes, Prof, to just cut you short, the former Prime Minister is there to address the press statement that he called for. In his company, MPs George Aladwa, Makadara, Junaid Mohammed, and we can also see the presence of the Budget and Appropriations Committee Chairperson, Samuel Atandi. The Prime Minister is also accompanied by a host of other leaders from the ODM party, majorly Nairobi MPs, and those from the other constituencies across the country to address the presser. This was much anticipated, given that he cancelled his appearance at the Kamukunji rally. And let's listen in to what the Prime Minister is about to say.
Are you ready? Yeah. Good? Ladies and gentlemen of the press, call this press conference in order to clarify where we are today. Yesterday, I did give an interview with the media and said that today, the 35th anniversary of Saba Saba, I was going to go to Kamukunji to join other Kenyans in commemorating this very important day. Unfortunately, as you all know, circumstances, today there are roadblocks all over town, which has made it difficult for people to move to Kamukunji. In the circumstances, I've decided therefore to talk to the media here at Serena. Some of you may not know fully the history of Saba Saba. As you know that Kenya attained independence in 1963, and at that time it was a multi-party system. There are three, KANU, KADU, and then APP. But after a very short period of time, those two other opposition political parties, because KANU had won the elections and formed the government, and the two other parties were in the opposition, they were folded up and joined KANU. And KANU remained the only political party. However, in 1966, an opposition party was formed called the Kenya People's Union. This party survived for 3 years. It was banned by the government in 1969, and the leadership of the party were arrested and taken to political detention. From that time onwards, Kenya remained a de facto single-party dictatorship from 1969 to 1982. 1982, when some of us wanted to form a political party, the regime then went to parliament and introduced a law to make the country a single party state de jure by introducing a constitutional amendment which is known as Section 2A that made it illegal to form any other political party. So from 1982, it remained literally a single-party dictatorship. That is the reason why in that same year there was a coup attempt which did not succeed. But before that, a number of Kenyans were arrested and taken to political detention. Most of them were lecturers at the University of Nairobi. Karua, people like Professor Katama Mukangi, Professor Willy Mutunga, Dr. Professor Yugi Akongo, quite a number of university lecturers were arrested and detained, and the others, Koigo Omwere, George Anyona, were taken to political detention. So this situation persisted. Some of us were arrested in that year, 1982, after the coup attempt, and taken to political detention. We stayed there for 6 years. Then in 1988, KANU brought an amendment to it saying that they were bringing what they called direct democracy, where there was a nomination process where people were lining up behind the candidates, and then the returning officer would count the voters who had lined up behind the candidates, and whoever got the highest number of votes, if you got more than 50% in total, you are automatically declared a member of parliament without having to go to the ballot. That process was abused. and many popular candidates were rigged at that stage, and therefore there was no real proper election in 1988. Come 1990, by that time I had been to detention 2 times. The 2 politicians, Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia, on the 2nd of May 1990, addressed a press conference, which they said that Kenya, the time had come for Kenya to become a multi-party. That Kenyans wanted a multi-party system of government. They were condemned seriously as being ethnic chauvinists, anarchists, people who want to bring chaos in this country. Told that this country was not yet cohesive enough to become multi-party. It will take another 100 years before Kenya became a multi-party system. These were daydreamers. So the kind of machinery at that time set off now to demonize the 2 members of parliament, the 2 former members of parliament. And in the process, of course, a number of very inflammatory statements were made, even by some today politicians who are talking about democracy here. You go into the archives, you see the names and what they said at that time. So in the process, Kenneth Matiba came to look for me to arrange for a meeting between him and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who is my father. I arranged the meeting, and then we met again. They met again with Sarubia, Toneko, and after lengthy deliberations, the decision was taken that they would be supported. At that same time, they sent the goons to Matiba's home the following day to attack his family. Matiba's wife was very badly wounded, Edith, and she was admitted to Nairobi Hospital, where we went to see her. After that, we, myself and Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia made a statement which we said we would go to Kamukunji to ask Kenyans if they were ready for multi-party. And we do it on the day of the 7th of July, that year, 1990. 7th of July, 1990. So after making that statement, we then now went on to mobilize for the meeting at Kamukunji. But then, of course, the police officers came to block us from meeting each other. They were stationed in my office at Ajib House, Matiba's office, up there on Koinange Street, and Rubia's office, and Paul Mites, and Gibson Kamal Koreas. July 1990, Matiba and Rubia were arrested and taken to detention. On the 4th of July, I was arrested and taken to detention. That same night, they arrested Gitombi Manyara, they arrested John Hamino here, and went to America. But that's how it was. But the International Commission of Jurists came up and made a very powerful lobby for the release of Haminwa and Manyara, and they were released. As we remained in detention. And as you know, Rubia is the one who was first affected. He got a very serious infection. was taken to hospital. Eventually, he nearly lost his vocal cords and was released. Matiba suffered a stroke in detention and was removed and eventually brought to Nairobi Hospital, after which she was then taken to London for treatment. That completely undermined his health permanently. And these two people eventually died because of not old age at that time, but because of injuries they sustained while in detention. Many people, but in spite of being detained, the Kenyan people braved it and came out in numbers to go to Kamukunji on the 7th of July, 1990. Many people were killed attempting to reach Kamukunji grounds that time. So then, after we came out of detention, then Ford was formed. We formed Ford. After forming Ford, we get pressed and said we were going back to Kamukunji. Eventually, when I was targeted again, I was moved away from here but our people braved it and managed to march all the way into Kamukunji. And you'll see the photograph in front page of Nation there today. You can see Martin Chikuku, James Orengo, Nyang Nyongo, Masinde Muliro on the back of that truck getting up to Kamukunji. That's why Kamukunji is very historical, the second liberation of this country. And that's why we celebrate Saba Saba. The fateful day on which Kenya's struggle for multi-party democracy took the most decisive turn is iconic and historical. It's a day rivaled only by the present day Masuja Day, previously Kenyatta Day, that celebrates the arrest and detention of the freedom fighters jointly called the Kapenguria Six. It is regrettable that the recognition and remembrance of Saba Saba has not been consistent in its short period history of 35 years. One moment it is important. The next moment it is not. On this 35th anniversary of Saba Saba, we decided to remember and to set the record straight on its significance, what it was and is, and what we ought to do with the foundation it laid for the country. Before that day, some patriotic Kenyans had demanded the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution. A number of people, including Kenneth Matiba, Raila Odinga, Mohamed Ibrahim, Toby Manyara, John Haminwa, and Charlie, among others, were arrested and detained. It is quite unfortunate that some of the people we were fighting then and who sanctioned those arrests are trying to hide behind Saba Saba to advance their political fortunes. Some of them are alive today and now are masquerading as liberators. On the fateful day, July 7th, 1990, thousands of Kenyans tried to gather the historic Kamukunji grounds to take stock of the past, the state of the nation, and chart a path of freedom forward. We decided that Saba Saba would be a march for political freedom and liberty, freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, and a new democratic constitution founded on multipartyism. Kenyans wanted a fulfillment of the Kenyan dream, which was eradication of poverty, ignorance, disease, and good governance. That clarity of mission is what made Saba Saba different from all other confrontations with the Moi-Kanu one-party state. Saba Saba, therefore, was and still is about the sacred and historic grounds of Kamukunji. It was not and is not just another routine street protest in Nairobi or any other town. At Kamukunji is where they held the last cow Kenya-Africa Union meeting in 1952. It is where Kanu's first rally was also held. It was also where the first Ford meeting was held after registration. Saba Saba had a singular purpose: to the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution and allow multi-party democracy in Kenya. Saba Saba had clear and known national conveners: Kenneth Matiba, Charles Rubia, and yours truly, Raila Odinga. It was what gave birth to a bigger and powerful forum for the restoration of democracy, Ford. Ford had a known nationally inclusive leadership: Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Philip Gachoka, Ahmed Bamariz, Salim Damu, Asinde Muliro, George Ndenge, Kenneth Matida, Charles Rubia, among others. Saba Saba was inclusive, democratic, and intergenerational. The old, the young people in and out of the government, professionals, academics, trade unionists, civil society, women groups, and religious groups. All of them found their voice in what it stood for: a people's struggle for good governance, freedom, and equal opportunity for all. It was not one group against the entire nation. It was not community against that community, or of this age against that age. The movement stood for a peaceful and constitutional change of guard. That is the reason it focused singularly on amendment and later on the overhaul of the Constitution. These features are what made Saba Saba succeed. A year after the march, on December 2nd, 1991, President Moi capitulated. Section 2A of the Constitution was removed. Multipartyism was reinstated. We achieved our core aim, which was to return Kenya to multipartyism. Today, we have more parties than one could imagine then. That single amendment paved the way for the complete overhaul of the Constitution and the birth in 2010 of a new Constitution that came with provisions for fundamental freedoms and liberties that our citizens enjoy today. It is clear that many of the ideals espoused by the dreamers behind Saba Saba have become part of the national aspiration. We are a better nation because Saba Saba happened. We have a duty and a responsibility to honor the men and women who dared to dream and to turn out at a time of great peril to themselves and their families. 35 years later, the country is grappling with a new wave of unrest and political activism. The question we have to ask ourselves is, where do we go from here? Do we embrace chaos or a coming together of minds and country? As a living architect of the events leading to the Saba Saba, I choose a coming together of minds and country in the interest of the country. I long fought for its progress, stability, and prosperity. The most important struggle taking shape in our country today is the struggle for good governance, economic opportunity, and equality. The biggest challenge facing Kenya today and into the foreseeable future is how to expand economic opportunity and lift particularly young Kenyans out of poverty, exclusion, and unemployment. Kenyans are yearning for programs and leaders that prioritize economic inclusivity, social justice, and political freedom. There is no doubt that the country is yearning for legislation that makes our institutions more responsive, programs that ensure adequate funding for services that touch wananchi, changes that make our judiciary free, efficient and progressive, measures that make the executive more accountable and efficient. We must end impunity and corruption within our three arms of government. Our leaders must become modest, ethical, humble, and accountable. What is to be done? What is to be done? I propose an inclusive, intergenerational, national conclave to hear our people across all divides and come up with irreducible reforms and changes necessary to take the country forward. I propose that the country urgently returns to the agenda of comprehensive police reforms, focusing on enhancing accountability, transparency, and improving the police-to-people relationship. Your rogue police force that shoots people with impunity. And this is a force that we inherited from the colonialists. It has not been reformed to become a people's defender, a people's servant. I propose that the conclave comes up with better and sustainable ways for addressing transparency, accountability, and impunity, especially with regard to corruption, and ensuring that leaders are held accountable for their actions. I propose that the forum comes up with a comprehensive and sustainable strategy for addressing youth unemployment and the expansion of opportunities for youth in the formal and informal sectors. Such a national conclave must have clear terms of reference and be populated and helmed by the most serious and sober minds in our nation. The proceeds of the national dialogue be subjected to a referendum. I rest my case. Thank you. Long live Kenya.
Do you have any questions? Just take us up. Yeah. Maybe one or two. Say your name and the media.
Thank you. My name is Duncan Kamba. I work with NGO. You have touched on issues of urgency looking at police reforms because they have gone back to the rogue days. What do you say of the interior fears issue shift to fill order about 2 weeks ago, a day after the June 26th process? And then secondly, you have said that where do we go from here? You have a close arrangement, working formula with the current president. What have you advised him? Because the country appears to be teetering what it's on the brink of precipice, so to speak. So what have you advised the president? Because it appears the country is being turned into a police state, or what you can say is considering it was a failed state.
We talked for a long time about police reforms. Not just this time, not only with regard to this regime, in the regime before it, even one before that other regime. I would say that, we inherited a colonial police force. And as you know, the colonial system, colonialism was meant to rule the natives. It was not a people-friendly government. So what should have happened was to democratize this police force, reform it so that it becomes a service, not a force. It is not enough to just change the words. That is from a force to a service. You must take measures to ensure that it's really a service, not a force. And this has not happened in our country. I've given examples of where it has happened. For example, in Tanzania. And you see a police force which is people friendly and also not trigger happy. About the minister you're talking about, I said he was totally out of order. And he apologized to me. And he apologized to me and to the people. And he said the day before yesterday that police should handle people with care. So, yeah.
That's fine.
Just one.
No, let's end there.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just wanted to know and find out. My name is Rallies from Kisii. Your proposals, as you put them, what are there also reports being shared by the president towards this, and what happens if this particular proposal is not taken into account?
Now, I've addressed the nation, and the president is part of the nation. And ask him, it applies to him as much as it applies to the other people. So I'm not a partisan in any way. This is a proposal that is coming to me and from my party also, the ODM. This is our stand as a party. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The former Prime Minister there addressing a press conference that was much awaited and communicated following his cancellation of the planned visit to the Kamukunji grounds that he yesterday announced will be the center point for congregation to celebrate the 35th anniversary of Saba Saba, and they finishing the press statement in the company of MPs, amongst them Junet Mohammed, Samatandi, and others who were in his company, and talking about a lot, giving a historical context of the day itself, but then culminating with the proposals that he said should be done on the outcomes subjected to referendum, among them to address the youth unemployment crisis in the country, the bulge which he said shouldn't be ignored by policy players, hold leaders to account for their action, and this is to end corruption and govern by the principles of good governance and constitutionalism, as well as comprehensive police reforms, decrying what's been happening recently following the close-range shooting of Boniface Kariuki, the mask vendor, and Albert Ojwang, the trained teacher who died while in police custody, under the flimsy excuses given by the National Police Service, who had told the nation that he had hit his wall against the walls of the cells. And he pointed out the most pertinent point, saying that where do we go from here? And his answer was not to embrace chaos and safeguard the stability of the nation. Odinga also called out people who said he are squandering as liberators and are hiding behind the gains made in the aftermath of Saba Saba in 1990. And he said that there should be clear and known national conveners to chart the way forward for the country. He also talked about, in the historical context, the arrests of academics, politicians, activists, journalists and students in the 1990s, saying this was partly because of the law that was passed by Parliament then, and which was shepherded by Charles Nyonyo, then Attorney General, and Mwai Kibaki, which made Kenya a one-party state under Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. And he said the raison d'etre as to why the people were unable today to congregate at the historic Kamukunji grounds was because of the lockdown imposed by the security agencies across the city, given that they have been minimizing the movements of people, saying that therefore wouldn't happen. And also talking about the state machinery's demonization of dissenting voices, then, which is also a reflection of today, given the attempts by the state to shut down live proceedings of coverages like this one, and also saying that the detention birthed the struggle and the thereafter multipartism that was attained in the many political party system that had made Kenya a multi-party democracy. Prof, coming to you, this was the most awaited party, is it, the dialogue party called for, and the subject to referendum?
Yeah, I think that's a progressive idea. The idea is most welcome. I think this country needs national consultation, soul-searching, introspection, so that we can reimagine our future. And we can only do so following particularly what happened after Saba Saba through some sort of national dialogue. But I think the most important thing is when it comes to selecting stakeholders, we do not need the usual faces of politicians or political leaders. Let them bring people from all walks of life, the academia, the young, the youth, the disabled, so that they can come up with proposals on the real ills and afflictions of Kenyans. It will make a great deal of a difference. But if they bring the same steering committee, the usual politicians that we know, I think it will be an exercise in futility. This is important because a national soul-searching always helps and transforms society at critical junctures like this. This juncture is the opportunity we cannot squander to rewrite the history of our country and to write anew the path, whether it's a path of political transformation, whether it's a path of economic transformation, including a path for moral transformation. Some of the moral ills, such as corruption, that we find in this country, terrorism, child abuse, this is the best opportunity, the best moment. And I think it is coming with the backdrop of that historiography of Saba Saba that he has told us. The brutality, the pain from which we have come, it should not revisit us. And I think that is how politicians should be able to interpret this.
And Kidi, looking at what the former Prime Minister has proposed, similar proposals were made, is it, by the President, one to compensate the victims of the families of whose kin were felled by police, including also a stoppage to donations in the name of Harambe, halving government advisors, yet he ended up increasing it. It seems that the broad-based partners are unable to read the national mood, and these proposals, to what extent can they be consequential?
I think that, one, when you speak about the assembly, the People's Assembly, that I pointed out earlier, Prof agreed with, and it seems the former Prime Minister is reading from the same script. The thing is, we do not want to be taken into the revolving doors that we've always been taken to by the political class. I must point it out today that when NADCO was formed, some of us warned against NADCO, in part because we did not see the political goodwill from both sides of the political divide to be able to implement anything that was going to come out of NADCO. Today, it is 2 years since NADCO happened, and even some of the things that were being discussed in NADCO are some of the things that are keeping young people on the streets. So I talked about the tripartite alliance, and I think that the church, the political parties, the academia, and particularly the youth constituency